I mean, I left Alaska for the fourth phase, took off. I think that was hard pill for him to swallow, just because, we pretty much were doing that entire film together. Like, I was the one person in that film that was going to go the whole way with Travis on every trip. And so I think that was hard for him, but at the same time, he knew that there was something going on with me and I needed to figure out. And, Trav's been an amazing support mechanism for me dealing with the hardships in my life that I have for the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, I think let's just get right into that one, because I feel like that was maybe a turning point in your career.
Okay. Well, let's start with a little bit how they transpired to that point. So we had just done about 4 weeks in Japan, went straight to Russia. I think we did 5 weeks in Russia, so we were gone for like almost 2 months. And Russia was super hard. Like, we got beat up. And then when we got busted by, the military being like pretty much held hostage by the Russian military and having to sit in the helicopter for like 4 hours and sign papers that say we knowingly flew into military Russian airspace, and they gave us a court date. Like, it was gnarly, dude. And all, we were trying to go to an island that there was a volcano that had a lake in the middle of it that had a volcano in the middle of that lake. That's what we were going to go snowboard on. I mean, it was going to be the most epic thing ever, But it was a long jaunt over the ocean. And so, that whole process, that whole trip kind of like started a little anxiety for me. We weren't getting what we wanted. Everybody was getting frustrated. There was snow 5 feet in the valley, and then up on the mountain, Siberian winds would rip it in the ocean. So I got back to Seattle, had 10 days at home before we went to Alaska, and my girlfriend at the time made me an appointment with a therapist. And so I went and met with him, and he gave me an SSRI, which is a serotonin regulator for depression, anxiety, stuff like that. But if you have predispositions to alcoholism, mental health in your family, drug addiction, anything like that, they have to be really careful about who they give it to, because it can pretty much throw you into a manic state within like a year. And so, that being said, he prescribed me an SSRI, went up to Alaska, and it was I just felt like we were like pushing it, and the weather wasn't cooperating. Same thing in Russia, everything that we planned wasn't working. Anytime we'd set parameters of what we were going to do, when we were going to do it, and what's going to allow us to do that, when we didn't get what we wanted, we would push those parameters further and further. And it just made me feel uncomfortable every time we did that. And it just kept happening. So we were in Alaska, and, I just was, not having it, man. My anxiety was going crazy. I'd never felt anything like this before, in my whole snowboard career. So one morning we head out to the helicopter, and we get in, and my mind's just not right. I wasn't, what it's like when you're not thinking good thoughts in a situation where you need to be on it. You need to have, precision focus, and I didn't have that, and I knew that. So I just broke down, dude. Like, I literally started crying. Like, had to get out of the helicopter. Got out of the helicopter, walked away. Kurt's tripping out. He's like, dude, what's wrong? Comes out. He's like, it doesn't matter, dude. do whatever you got to do. Like, it doesn't matter. We're just filming snowboard film. It's fine. And, you know, so that kind of helped a little bit. And then I took that day and just relaxed. And throughout the day, talked to my ex-girlfriend stuff. You know, it's just like, felt like I couldn't shake it. I wasn't going to be able to get away from this feeling I had. And I had always had this, like, inclination that I was going to die in an avalanche for a long time. I had 2 friends when I was 17 years old that got caught in an avalanche and died like 2-3 miles from my house at a mountain I look at every day, you know, in Juneau. So I've always had that, like, this inner voice, you know, that, and it was gnarly. And so I felt like I had to leave. If it wasn't an avalanche that killed me, you know, that anxiety and whatever it was, that was going to kill me in a different way. So I left, and, you know, it's like the hardest decision I've ever had to make in snowboarding, for sure. It's like, dude, I'm walking away from my crew, walking away from my boys, walking away from Travis, everything he's put into it, you know, like, I had so much on my plate that I just had to, like, walk away from. It was hard, dude. But I think it was the right decision for me at that time, and that's what I needed to do. And stuff like that you can't look back on, because you're going to second guess yourself forever. You know, you're just going to beat yourself up time and time again, because I could sit there all day long and say, dude, you would have been fine. Look, they killed it after you left. And they did. They got snow. It was epic. And I missed out. But that wasn't the point, you know. I needed to figure out what was going on with myself. And I think, you know, part of the process of that was I had quit drinking like a year or 2 before that. You know, we grew up partying. We're in the snowboard industry, you know, booze is around. Growing up in Alaska, you know, I started drinking when I was probably 16. I have alcoholism's something I've seen very upfront and personal throughout my whole life. And I felt that I was getting to a point in my life where these hangovers were lasting longer and longer. You know, like, if you have a 2-day hangover, do that once or twice a week, you know, it's half your life if you think about it. Wasting, feeling like shit. And I was like, well, do I want to choose snowboarding or do I want to choose alcohol? And it was a pretty easy thing, because I had always, I don't know, I felt like I'm a pretty honest person. I'm a very honest person, straight up with people, no bullshit. And any time that I'd ever been ashamed of myself in my life was when alcohol was involved. You know, I can't think of something that I did that I was ashamed of when I was sober, you know, ever. And, you know, I wasn't an alcoholic in the terms that what you picture an alcoholic is, but it's such a broad brush, right? And I've had alcoholism in my family, and I've seen what it can do, and I didn't want that for my life. I knew at some point in my life I would have to quit, because I didn't want to be like that. And not to mention, just like, you know, none of this stuff gets talked about, like how bad alcohol truly is for you. We have all these things that are illegal. You can't do this, can't do that. It's like alcohol is celebrated, and whatever. I'm not putting anything against it. Like, I had a great time. I love it. But an education when I was younger probably would have been a good thing, you know? Like, just blacking out, you know? Like, I blacked out a lot. And if you look into the science of what blacking out is, it's pretty heavy. It's not something to be taken lightly. And, you know, none of this stuff's ever talked about when you're younger. So I think, like, it's unfortunate that we don't talk about it, because I think alcohol's perfectly fine for some people, perfectly fine for a lot of people, and for a lot of people it's not. And it's not a big deal. That's just what it is. And, especially walking away from alcohol, it's when people have known you like that your whole life, it's tough. It's tougher on other people, I think, almost, for them, like, they don't understand. Like, what do you mean you're not drinking? So, like,
Almost offended.
I did that for a month once. Yeah, that's cool. Like, yeah, exactly. And a lot of people, some of my best friends would get upset when they were drinking and I wasn't, and like had this chip, like I was trying to be better than them, when it's like, dude, I'm not, it has nothing to do with you. I guarantee you that. I'm doing this for myself. Like, I hope that one day you'll be able to understand that. And, everybody has. It just takes time. Just because you're going to change doesn't mean everybody's going to, it's just going to take time for people to understand where you're coming from. And it did. And, it's been good for me. And so that was, I think, a catalyst of that anxiety that I started to feel in Russia and Alaska, not having that alcohol to fall back on, coming back from a big day out in the backcountry or out in the heli.
Because this is a first full season sober since you started kind of dabbling with booze.
Yeah, since snowboarding, pretty much.
Since snowboarding.
Yeah.
Staying in an industry, too, I want to point out that is very influenced by alcohol and trying to clean up. That's a punk rock move, honestly. It is. Feels like it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I guess, I always had that to fall back on, that crutch. Like if I had a heavy day, if I got swept in an Abbey, anything like that, go have a couple beers, some Caesars, whatever, and get lit up real quick. And it would kind of dissipate, but it wouldn't ever leave. It would just hide itself. And so all those years of just kind of pushing that stuff to the side started to slowly catch up with me. And so I leave Alaska, go back home. My girlfriend at the time had just finished med school, and she moved from Seattle up into Bellingham, and she was gonna start working at a doctor's practice. She was gonna take over his practice, a naturopathic doctor. And she just, we ended up breaking up. It was something she wanted to do out of nowhere, and it was super heavy on me. Like, it hit me hard, and I was in a tough spot. And then a couple months down the road, it was like a light switch just clicked, and it was like I had energy. I was stoked. I was motivated, and things just started happening. And it was, I'll just pre-reference. What it was is that SSRI had caught up. And so all those predispositions I have were the perfect makeup for me to get thrown into a manic episode, which is the beginning of a bipolar prognosis. So it was crazy, dude. For 4 or 5 months, I was running as hot as you can go. Like, my mind is racing. Like, that Neuralink thing that Elon Musk has? That's like what it felt like. I was plugged into something that gave me a higher mental state. It was insane. My creative capacity was at an all-time high. I started Ingrained Ink with James Johnson, a friend of mine from Alaska. He does traditional Tlingit form line carving and painting. Jamie Lynn was staying at my house for a lot of the summer. Matt French was coming over, so we had this awesome group. Dudes, just kind of like this artistic flow going, and it was, looking back on it, it was super gnarly, but at that time it was so awesome. Like, they describe it as euphoric, because like I went to a library, grabbed a physics book that I just randomly saw, started reading it at home, and like I was understanding physics, like the basic fundamentals of physics, but never diving into it as a young kid. Being able to understand that, it was awesome. So I was like into space stuff. Started picking up cars. I literally bought like 7 cars that summer, old cars, like 66 Chevy Stepside, a Dodge Dart. I'd never worked on cars, but I had people around me that knew how to, so I just kind of went into it. And like, one of the main things of like having a manic episode is you talk very fast. A lot of times people don't even understand you. You're spending tons of money. You're staying up. Like, I would stay up for 3 days straight and not be tired. It was crazy. And you end up, and I think it's really hard on the people that know you and the people that you're really close to, because you're on such a level that if something doesn't work out, you don't care. You don't like hang on to it. You just, all right, that didn't work, let's do the next thing. And that kind of, I think the relationships kind of take that same toll. It's like, if people are worried about you and they're concerned, a lot of times what they get is like, yeah, I'm fine, whatever, later, and they don't know how to deal with it because you're literally on fire. Like, I was moving so fast, spending so much money, and you find yourself surrounded by people you normally wouldn't have. Sometimes they're great people. I met a lot of awesome people during that time, and some people that aren't. Some people want to take advantage of you. And it was, for everything that I've gone through and how gnarly it got after that, all that stuff, like Ingrained Ink, the relationships that I formed with James, the stuff that he's doing now, none of the stuff that we've done together with Ingrained Ink or any of that would have happened without me going totally fucking crazy that summer. So it's like anything. There's good and bad, yin and yang. We wouldn't know what good was if we didn't get beat down. If we didn't get fucking smacked down, we don't know what true happiness is unless we find the bottom. And so I'm at the top, having the time of my life. Like, I bought an excavator. Like, I mean,
great purchase.
It was a great purchase.
I see.
Yeah,
Tons of reason in there.
Sidecar, Russian sidecar.
That's a must-have. That's a must-have. Can't live without that.
I mean, let's go till we get something that doesn't make sense.
I mean, dude, and it was crazy. And I met this guy down the street from me. His name's Stan. He's about 70 years old, and he would do estate sales. And so I would go to his estate sales, and I was just buying so much crazy stuff, dude. Like, you should see some of the stuff I have. But I didn't need any of it. It was just like I said, you spend a lot of money, and I spend a lot of money, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in a matter of months without even knowing. And so things started to come to a head, and I found out that my ex-girlfriend at the time had gotten pregnant with her new boyfriend pretty recent, pretty quickly. And so that was pretty, at the time I was still in a manic state, so it was like somewhat easy to swallow. But, further down the line, It was about 4 or 5 months when I started to run out of steam. And so when you're in that manic state, typically your depressive state that lasts after that's going to be at least twice as long.
Oh.
And mine lasted at least over a year, that first one. Because this can happen again and again. And it happened a couple times before I got, kind of level myself out to where I don't have these ups and downs. And I remember, it was like I woke up out of a dream. My dad had come down, and Jess was super worried about me as well. So she was at my house, and I remember my dad just in the kitchen countertop was stacked a foot tall, just a mound of bills that I had just not even looked at for 5 months. Didn't even care. It didn't even matter. And it was just I woke up and I was starting to come to, what the fuck happened to me in these last 4 months, and it started to get really scary. And I remember sitting in my living room, and it was like I was watching myself from above, sitting there kind of just with my head between my legs, and my Jess and my dad talking what are we going to do? They were pretty scared. I was freaked out because it was getting bad, and I didn't know how to, my breathing was going crazy. I felt like I couldn't breathe, and my mind was just running a million miles an hour. And it was just, depression's one thing, but if anxiety, when you have it at when anxiety gets bad, it can be worse than depression, because it's depression, you're low and you just sit there, but anxiety feels like you can just keep digging yourself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so they decided that we should go to the hospital, so we went to the ER, and I proceeded to sit in a hospital bed for 6 hours waiting to get help. And meanwhile, there's a girl next to me who's 17 years old with her mom. She had been going through some anxiety and depression, trouble with her friends. She had been cutting herself. She was, she was pretty much suicidal from what I heard. There's a sheet between us, so I could hear everything they're saying. And the social worker had gone up to her, and it was weird how she was handling this 17-year-old girl that obviously needed help. It was like she was trying to pressure her into the answers that she wanted, in the direction she wanted things to go. And I felt so bad for this girl. And the social worker left, and her and her mom are talking, and she's just let's go. We're leaving. This is ridiculous. She's not helping us at all. And that was really sad to hear that. And when the social worker came back to me, the conversation was about a minute long, and it was if you're not going to commit suicide tonight, then there's nothing we can do for you. And that was it. Sitting in a bed for 6 hours.
Yeah.
So hearing that and then listening to that 17-year-old girl, I was just what the fuck is going on, dude? And Washington State has the 49th worst mental health in the United States, mental health care, which is crazy to me. And so, yeah, so that process began of me trying to pretty much build myself from the ground up again. And that's what I've been doing for 8 years.
I want to hear more about those first steps and where that went.
Yeah. So, anytime you have a mental health issue, you're going to want to deal with a therapist, a nurse practitioner, and your general practice doctor. So I got a nurse practitioner who knew what she was talking about, and literally that's all she does for a living is designate the right meds to people with, you know, what they're dealing with at the time. And within 15 minutes of a conversation with her, she, you know, said that, yeah, I'm diagnosed with bipolar. And I had already been doing research, so I had kind of like had a feeling that's what the answer was going to be when I went in there. And, you know, I remember my mom being super happy because they knew what it was, which was, yeah, it was good. But I mean, I didn't have the same enthusiasm.
Sure.
Just because I knew it wasn't going to be an easy road. There's not a magical pill for any of it. And even if there is a magical pill, eventually that magical pill is not going to work anymore. And you're going to have to find another one.
How old are you at this time? Sorry.
I was 30, 35. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, you know, getting on the right meds was obviously the first step because I needed to be able to level myself out. She didn't want me to go back into a place where I'm going to have these crazy ups and downs, you know. Even if I was stagnant, even if I was depressed, if I was at least flat and not going up and down, you know, that's at least a baseline starting point that we can work from. And so I had to pretty much redesign my whole life, how I ate, how I slept, you know, these medications I was taking, my sugar intake, meditation, mindfulness, breath work, and there's so much that you can do to help yourself, but there's only so much you can, you know, do at one time. You can't do everything at once. And it was definitely a learning curve. Like I said, my depression that year lasted like 13 or 14 months. And so obviously that took a toll on my snowboarding. I would have crazy anxiety about snowboarding. I would wake up 30 to 40 times a night, drenched in sweat every night for months. I'd wake up instantly and be drenched in sweat and have to run to my toilet in my bathroom and throw up every morning for months straight. Every time I would go snowboarding, I would throw up before I went. Like, go to Bald Face, throw up in the morning at the hotel before I got on the boat and went up, you know. Brad Andrews, who's a photographer up in Bellingham, he was, you know, there were certain people that were kind of crucial in helping me get back to where I needed to be. Brad was one of them. Because he wasn't afraid to talk about this stuff. He kind of understood what I was going through, and, you know, he would, even if we would make plans to go up and I would bail because I was anxiety or whatever it was that I couldn't get myself to go, he wouldn't, you know, he wouldn't hold it against me. He made it, you know, he made it okay to I guess to feel like that. And so he would take me up, and on the way, I'd have to have him pull over because I would throw up before we got up there. Once we got up there and we started snowboarding, it was fine. It was on. Like, it didn't, you know, everything faded away, but it was that mental space that I couldn't get out of, that I was stuck in for so long. And so it was obviously really hard for me because one of the coolest things about snowboarding is being able to look at a piece of terrain, at least for me, look at a piece of terrain and find my line, figure out what I'm going to do, what trick I'm going to do, visualize it in my head, and to be able to do it exactly like I visualize it or better, you know, is the best feeling in the world. And I'm just used to that. So having this total head change in a time in my career when I was kind of at a pinnacle, you know, working on the biggest action sports film of all time with my best friends, and I couldn't even go out. Travis had to beg me to come down to Jackson to shoot in the 4th phase. Beg me. And finally I gave in. I'm like, all right, I'll fly down. And yeah, man, it was, well, it still is, you know, it's an ongoing battle, but I feel like I'm on the right track, and even though it's took me a long time to get there, you know, here I am.